Hello everyone, Vince Hosang again, and welcome to another steamy and oh so thought-provoking edition of Classic Puzzle Critiques. We have two stories on the dining room table today. It's Rugrats Theory and Dead Bart, two stories that are often maligned by my particular circle of friends, and the former more so than the latter. I think even among the Bad Creepypasta crew and Fish Stick on a Stick, and Dennis and Alexo, I don't think we talk too much about Dead Bart. I think we have a general consensus that is not very good, but it's been a long time since I've heard this story read or read it myself. Like, it's been almost a decade now. God, I feel ancient now. So we're going to be reading them to see if they actually hold up. I'm going to say, first and foremost, objectively, right now, just to kind of cap in, I'm mostly speaking on behalf of Dead Bart in that regard. I'm going to see if Dead Bart holds up, because Rugrats Theory is garbage. And I know it's kind of, I guess, rude or even presumptuous of me, despite having not read it in a long time, to just say that. But I think it's evident enough to where I don't think it really needs to be argued. So we're going to be reading the tweaked version instead of the original version. The original version is so bad it doesn't even warrant being discussed. There's not much differences, but certain terms, like, okay, I'm just going to read the first sentence of the original version right now, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. The Rugrats were a figment of Angelica's demonic and unimaginable imagination. So, after that first sentence, if you want to argue that this story might potentially hold up after all these years, I don't think we really meant to have that discussion at all. This is going to be basically a public pillory of the Rugrats theory. Dead Bart we will be trying to critique earnestly and sincerely. But let's get on to the Rugrats theory. The Rugrats were really a figment of Angelica. I'm sorry, the Rugrats were a figment of Angelica's imagination. Chucky died a long time ago along with his mother. That's why Chaz is a nervous wreck all the time. Tommy was a stillborn. That's why Stu was constantly in the basement making toys for the son who had never had a chance to live. The DeVilles had an abortion. Angelica couldn't decide whether it would be a boy or a girl, thus creating twins. So wait, the DeVille, so both of them, husband and wife, like, what's his name? What was his fucking name? Was it Howard? Howard DeVille? I think that was his name. So Howard had an abortion too. Like, he went to a gynecologist, or he went to a back alley abortion clinic, and say, hey, get this thing out of me, I've made a mistake. And they open up his asshole. Was he impregned? That was horribly tasteless, and I'm not sorry. As for All Grown Up, Angelica was a bipolar schizophrenic who as a teenager became addicted to various narcotics, bringing her back to her childhood, thus creating a world in her mind that she obsessed over. Because of the time lapse between the present and the last time she interacted with her imaginary world, she made them older. Alexa was constantly taking hits of acid, huh? Okay, sure. So she would never be able to live without a creation. So she would never have to live without a creation, excuse me. To her, her creations were her only company in the judgmental world. Angelica's mom actually died of a heroin overdose. Angelica was schizophrenic and bipolar because she was a crack baby. Okay. That's for those who are, I guess, uninitiated. That has been for the longest time a bit of an in-joke in the Bad Creepypasta crew. And I thought in the tweaked version it would be cut out entirely because they would realize that it's just such a blunt and stupid line that it doesn't quite fit. And yet here it is. schizophrenic and bipolar because she was a crack baby. Additionally, Drew, in his depression, married a gold-digging... Jesus fucking Christ. We got against... Wait, what are you talking about gold digging? Like, she was a high-powered, like, businesswoman. Like, she was... That was a point of Charlotte's character. She was a workaholic, and she was kind of neglectful to Angelica because she had no time for her. Which, surprisingly, never was a point of drama in Rugrats for some reason. I in hindsight, you think it would be a one episode where she'll like realize like, oh, I need to spend more time with my daughter. Even fucking Rocket Power had that. But I digress. Yeah, so a gold digging whore, that doesn't make sense. Like this sounds like someone who really honestly had a vendetta against the character and wanted to like lay it in their quote unquote horror story that Angelica idolized because she fooled herself into thinking it was a real mom. However, she always had a concept of her mom, Cynthia. Had a concept of her mom? That's a very awkward sentence. She used a Barbie doll to mirror her mother's image, wearing an unwashed dress and jacked up hair, which is why she was so attached to it. Later in life, she followed in her mother's footsteps, dying at an overdose at the age of 13 when All Grown Up was quote-unquote cancelled. A narrator, whomever is telling this story, you do realize that they're not real people, right? You know that they're drawings on... They're a collection of drawings and still images that have been repeatedly flipped to give the illusion of movement and thus give the illusion of life. You know, it's not real. It's not like... I mean, to be fair, if something like... I'm willing to bet a fair amount of this had actually happened IRL at Nickelodeon. With many horror stories as we do here. But they weren't real people. The only Rugrat not to be fictional, however, was the unborn Tommy's brother Dill. Angelica didn't know the difference between Dill and her creations. Dill didn't follow her commands, and after endlessly crying, and a refusal to disappear like the others did, and when Angelica was angry with them, so she hit... Wait, what? And Dill didn't follow her commands, and after endless crying and a refusal to disappear like the others did when Angelica was angry with them, so she hit them. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay, that sentence... Okay, I'm going to read it one more time. Dill didn't follow her commands, and after endless crying and a refusal to disappear like the others did when Angelica was angry with them, so she hit them. Yeah, take out the word so. Redo this. Retweet. Release the Super Snyder cut of this and retweet that line. After she hit him, he screamed what? He screamed a screeching tune, and Stu ran in and pulled his niece. How do you misspell? This is a tweak version. How do you misspell niece? It's spelled Neice. What the fuck? This version is supposed to be better than the crappy original one. Pulled his niece off his only child, but it was too late. Dill had a brain hemorrhage, which resulted in a deformation. As he grew up, the damage only became more evident, and by the time he was 9 and all grown up, he lived as an outcast, being ridiculed for his weirdness and retardation. Okay, I think you're... Like, you know, when you make a... I'll reserve this criticism for after the story, but I'll just say that's not true. I'm fairly certain that Dill was actually kind of popular because of his weirdness. Not popular, but people liked him. Like, you remember that there was that episode where he kept coming up with these like really cool like knickknacks and sell to people, and Tommy was taking advantage of his brother's creativity until he became like creatively like basically drained of all of his creativity. The immense guilt over this is what caused Angelica to start using drugs and to uncreate the Rugrats briefly until her experience with hallucinogenics. Chaz lost his mind after the death of his wife and was in denial that she was ever a prostitute. On a trip to Paris to find love, Chaz fell in love with a hooker named Kyra. Or Kira. Sorry, I remember it was Kira. I watched Rugrats in Paris so many times as a kid. Like, I wore that fucking VHS. It was a orange VHS tape. I distinctly remember that. It was originally going to marry a different hooker, but she just wanted him for his money. Oh, excuse me. Kira once had a daughter named Kimmy, but the baby was torn from her by law due to her cocaine addiction. Angelica imagined Kimmy from Kira's stories. Upon return to America, Chaz married Kira, and she got her green card. It was a surprisingly happy and romantic story. Well, thank you, omniscient narrator, for your input on that. Your unwanted input. Kira continuously struggled with addiction, but was relatively happy with her new life with Chaz. Susie was Angelica's only friend, who entertained the thought of Angelica's creations because they seemed to make her happy. She later became a psychologist and teamed up with Nickelodeon. Okay. When Angelica teamed up with Nickelodeon to make the Rugrats. When Angelica died of an overdose, Susie helped arrange a funeral. Wait. Okay. Angelica died at 13. Susie was the same age as Angelica, so and All Grown Up ended at 13, as it said in the story. So was she a psychiatrist at 13 years old? I think you kind of bungled your stupid theory, pasta narrator. When Angelica died of an overdose, because of her addictions and mental state, Angelica was expelled from society, which led to a break in reality and her eventual death. She spent the last days of her life in the back of a school cafeteria, imagining friends around her and playing with the lives of her creations. Yeah, I think it goes without saying that was shit, but the criticism I had, and it's something that really extends to a lot of Lost episode pastas. And it's something that it's one of the reasons why I don't like covering Lost episode creepypastas that much, because it's a constant complaint that I have with them, and it's very rarely addressed. Like, I can count on one hand how many Lost episode creepypastas I've read that have managed to negate this issue, or at the very least try their best to address it. And oddly enough, even like, as much as I don't like that story, Squidward's Suicide did a decent job of trying to negate this criticism too. So, and that criticism being, why, basically, I don't know how to put this. Why does it seem like the person who wrote this story doesn't seem to actually understand basic, like, character, like the basic characterization of the thing that they're allegedly making a theory of? There is nothing in this story, no hints towards this being potentially true. The point of a theory creepypasta, first off, is supposed to be, it's small little things that you may not have noticed in this TV show or a book or any form of media that you might not have picked up on, like small little tidbits that can lead to someone forming a conclusion that was something that wasn't originally thought up on. Like, all these little things that kind of seem innocuous at first that could be hints to something even more complicated than we initially thought. And there's none of that in this story. There's no sources, there's no examples or references to episodes or any of that to substantiate this theory. Honestly, it doesn't even really come off as a theory, because it's just like saying that this is undoubtedly what this thing is. Angelica died of a drug overdose. Like, all these things, like, can you really call it a theory where you're saying that, okay, the whole foundation of this TV show was formed when a psychologist came to Nickelodeon to help make it based on this one person's hallucinations? I'm saying that that's a declarative statement right there. There's nothing to say like, oh, well, you know, have you ever thought about this, Y, and Z? I think even the SpongeBob creepypasta, the theory about it being like the nuclear fallout and like them being like mutants or something like that, even that, I think, gave some examples to kind of bolster the argument that this might be the case and this might actually be how the story of this and the environment is kind of made. Even I hate it as much as I hate to admit it. Even like those shitty lost episodes of like Ed and Eddie, where the cult attack is really in purgatory. Like even that does more with what we know about the show than this does with the Rugrats. It just name drops the characters, and it kind of just expects you, I guess, to know what they look like. Like Dill, kind of having a funny shaped head. Like I guess like I knew that because I watched the show when I was a kid, but most people don't know who the fuck Dill is. Like, I'm talking about most people who don't read or never watch Rugrats. Like I have the mindset when it comes to like stories that kind of have this like lost episodes or video game creepypasta. You need to write this story as if it's everyone's first time coming into the story. And now there's a tightrope walk of being able to do that while at the same time not making everything overly complicated with the explanation of like certain aspects of the media that you're trying to use for your story. Yeah, you want to make sure that there's enough detail, just enough detail to satisfy people who are coming into it like with fresh eyes and people who are familiar with the works. And I think like stories like NES Godzilla and Ben Drown do a decent job of doing that. But then you have stories like this that just, again, this feels like someone who automatically assumed that you would know everything about like Akira and all this shit, and like it just drops off the names. It doesn't elaborate on their characteristics. Like the fact that like at that moment where it's like, oh well, Drew, and I also like that it didn't mention Drew until just but it mentioned Drew. He married a gold digging whore, and I immediately piped up like that's not like that completely goes against the character of the person that you're describing right there. Like the character is very much not a gold digger. She's not necessarily the most pleasant of people, and I think you could have made a comment about that. In fact, I think you could have made a more poignant, I guess, points by using the characterization of her being kind of neglectful to Angelica to kind of lean into her being as, I guess, broken as she is in your quote unquote theory, where that would actually kind of fit within the what's set up in the original piece that you're covering. But instead you just made some shit up. And the fact that I can immediately call bullshit on that, I think is kind of telling. Yeah, so I'm going to look at these comments, and I think it's kind of 50-50. I think people fucking like talking about, oh my god, is this real? Oh my god, it's so surprising. I can't believe this. Wow, wowie, gee willikers. I mean, I just want to, I assume this is young kids who probably don't really know much about actual good stories. I would like to think that children have higher standards in this, but I kind of come off as an asshole right there. But we're gonna get right back into Dead. We're gonna get right into Dead Bart now. Just hopefully, like, bleach my brain of that garbage I just read. So this is Dead Bart. And it's written by I think Kai Simpson. Oh, groovy. Wait a minute, is this because there's a video that accompanies this, so I don't know if the story itself is accredited to it or the video. So I could be Kai Simpson who wrote this, but we'll try to. I don't know, whatever. Credit yourself when you release a story, so I can give you credit in the comments. Not in the comments, but in the video title. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from Season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. For what has been pieced together, the lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening. Weren't all of the first episodes written by Matt Groening? I could be wrong. I don't know. During the production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet and seemed nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present resulted in them getting very angry, forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt. I first heard of it at an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone who was in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. The episode's production, I find it. I gotta comment on that real quick. How do I put this? That sounds like you need to be very careful about when you make like claims like that in a story. I don't mean like, oh, might get sued. I mean in the sense that this seems like something that could be easily looked up and refuted, because it sounds like something that would very easily, not necessarily even make headlines, but it would be something that's that would become an event, if that makes any sense. Like, someone brings up something and it makes one of the showrunners so upset that they quit a presentation hours early. Like, people will be talking about that for months, and it'll be something that's like brought up on message boards and shit. That sounds like something that could be easily disproven. So that's just my little criticism of that. The episode's production number was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart. The episode was labeled 7G06 Moaning Lisa. The episode labeled 7G06 Moaning Lisa was made later and given Dead Bart production code to hide the latter's existence. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about this will cause them to do everything they can to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke with the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone when he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I had followed him, probably expecting a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all the color drained from his face and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me any more details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not say what it was, for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address on my browser and came to a site that was completely black except for a line of yellow text and a download link. I clicked on it and the file started downloading. Once the file was downloaded, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I've ever seen. The system restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it onto my now empty computer, and as I was expected, there was an episode of Simpsons on it. The episode started off like any other episode, but the very poor quality animation. It had very poor quality animation, excuse me. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. Homer seemed angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa seemed anxious, Bart seemed to have a genuine anger and hatred for his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip, and near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was flying around, as you expect. However, the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, and Bart broke a window on the plane and was sucked out. Yeah, that ain't happening. I'm fairly certain those windows... How did he break a window on a plane? That ain't happening. Even the cartoon logic. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of The Simpsons world represented life, and death made things more realistic. This was used in the episode. Are you just pulling that out of your ass, or is that something that Matt actually said? Because, again, that seems like something I could just do a quick Google search and just prove it that's not the case. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it not having to move, and it made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with a shot of Bart's corpse, and Act 2 started. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at a table crying. The crying went on, and it got more pain and sounded more realistic. Better acting than you would think possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear them murmuring in the background. The characters could be made out, excuse me. Oh god, please no. They were stretching and blurring. They looked like deformed shadows from random bright colors drawn on them. Okay. There were faces looking out the window, flashing in and out, so you're never sure what they looked like. The crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying 1 year passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin and still sitting at the dining table. Still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, and as they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was just lying in front of his tombstone, looking just like it did at Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually it stopped and just stared at dead Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summary, he tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in the version I saw, and you can't tell what Homer's saying. The view zoomed out on the episode came to a close. The tombstones in the background had names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989, some that haven't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates on them. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpsons on a family couch, looks like in the intro, but they were drawn fucking hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode the first time. You could try to use the tombstones on to predict the death of the living Simpsons guest stars, but something odd about most of the ones who hadn't died yet. All of their deaths were listed on the same date. Yeah, this isn't very good. I just realized, it just occurred to me, I didn't even try to read that with any dramatic weight or anything like that, and I do apologize. I'm supposed to put a modicum of effort, because I did say that I would try to approach this as seriously as possible. This kind of goes into my complaints with the previous story, that being that this writer presumes that you know certain information about The Simpsons, and thus deems it necessary to kind of omit certain details. And they use an image right here from an episode where, yeah, everyone knows the dead Bart image. Like, I recognized it immediately when I first saw it. It was an image where Homer's face is melting because Bart is angry and he's just imagining his father being melted alive. So, yeah, I don't really think there's much to say. Like, if I have to give some kudos to the story, I do appreciate that it's a little bit more grounded at first, where this is someone who's, like, obviously interested in the behind the scenes of The Simpsons and, you know, going to talk to Matt Groening and whatnot. I don't care for the, you know, the weird, dumb, pseudo-supernatural tone that it kind of takes, like, I think 2/3 into the story, where it's like, oh, where it's a magic computer file that nearly crashed my thing, and fucking, it was an episode of The Simpsons, and magically all the dates of the people who were going to appear in the show and when they would die. Like, I don't care for that. I think it's supposed to be paying homage, I guess, to the kind of weird joke and that people have with the Simpsons, where it's like, oh, The Simpsons predicted this and The Simpsons predicted that, but I don't think that really warrants an entire story being written to kind of pay lip service to that. Honestly, like, this story isn't the worst I've read within this little subgenre. I wouldn't even put it in the top 5, honestly. The moments, I guess, that work are the moments of again, the kind of lead up to him watching the episode, him talking about the behind the scenes as a fan. Although I think it would have benefited the story greatly if the narrator actually had more of a presence in the story as someone who's trying to investigate this and see, like, to find out what the deal is. Like, and it also kind of raises the question of how did he know about this, and basically, I would like to have known more about it in the lead up to him actually wanting to uncover the details of this story. I'm not saying I wanted, like, a huge dramatic backstory. I just, like, maybe him just talking on a message board, like a Simpsons fan message board. Someone brings up this rumor, and that person immediately gets, like, banned for bringing it up. And then that makes it like, oh, that's kind of weird. And he knows that anyone who brings up the missing episode immediately gets banned. Like, I think that would have done a decent job to kind of set up him wanting to explore this and really learn as much as he can about the lost episode. But as it is, it's just like some random dude who just got, like, happened upon Matt groaning, I guess, when Matt was feeling particularly generous despite his, I guess, rampant schizophrenia, I think it's supposed to be in this. Where it's like, oh, I could just tell you to go fuck off like I tell everyone to fuck off who asks me about this story, but I'm going to tell you exactly what the deal is. So, yeah, that's fantastic. All in all, again, not very good. The kind of stinger at the end didn't really resonate with me, to be honest. I don't think I really have much else to say. It's just not a very good story. Is it one of the worst creepypastas ever made? Heavens no, not even close. I wouldn't even put in the top 10 of worst creepypasta of all time. I'm looking at the comments here, and for the most, I think people are, honestly, it's kind of weird. I think people are more judgmental of or critical of the last story I read of. They're more critical of this story than they are of Rugrats Theory, and that's fucking bizarre, because at the very least, this story does more to ground itself in some semblance of reality and realism than the Rugrats Theory did. And I don't know, these kind of go to show the weird, like, inconsistent nature of the creepypasta fandom. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you want more videos like this, feel free to let me know. If you have any suggestions for random pasta critiques or classic pasta critiques, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I will give serious consideration into reading them. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and read The Books of Blood by Clive Barker if you want to read good horror stories. Bye.